And so when we take a step back to how is money broken? How do we get to the point we're at now? The way that I would describe it is that because of that huge mismatch between fast transaction speeds and slow settlement speeds, and all these kind of layers of centralization to address it, we've ended up in a place of about 160 different currencies. So every currency in the world, except for the dollar and a handful of other reserve currencies, can basically be thought of as arcade tokens or casino chips. Currencies lack moneyness, the property of moneyness outside of their borders. So people in those jurisdictions, they have this currency monopoly imposed upon them, and if they bring their money elsewhere in the world, it's not really useful. So for example, if I bring Egyptian pounds back to where I live in New Jersey, it's actually very, very hard to get those Egyptian pounds off my hands for any sort of goods or services or even for another type of money. It's actually arguably harder in some cases to convert that than it would a popular casino chip. It's got about the same amount of liquidity when it's outside of its context. And then even a wealthy country like Norway, for example, it's a similar thing. If I have Norwegian currency in Egypt or Norwegian currency in the United States, it's a very small, unsaleable money, even though it's a wealthy nation. And so we've kind of broken our currency up into all these different pieces. And we kind of think of this as normal now. We don't, like a lot of policymakers, a lot of people, they just kind of think this is how it works. Every country has a currency, or at least most countries have a currency, and it's normal for them to all be 160 different floating or pegged different exchange rates. But when we go back in history, that wasn't always the case. They used shared money like gold and silver. They had more interconnectedness between them. And that's been a property that's been lacking this whole time. And the way that that's controlled is basically there's only two main ways to get value in or out of a country. One is ports of entry, but of course ports of entry are very controlled, very surveilled, and it's hard or risky to bring large amounts of value, especially outside of very restrictive areas. So that's one measure of control that keeps people trapped in. There's basically limited value density going through a port of entry. And the other one is a bank wire. You can, of course, send money digitally, but the problem is those are also very surveilled, very controlled. The country can basically decide who can access, for example, a dollar bank account, who can only access their local currency account, and they can set artificial exchange rates. So we'll often see, for example, there will be a country where the black market rate or the street rate is one exchange rate. That's kind of the real liquid exchange rate. But then there's like a fake exchange rate that when you go through the wire system, they impose basically what they think the currency should be worth. And they kind of put themselves in the middle of that. If they let the transaction go through it at all, it could be sanctioned, it could be blocked for any number of reasons. And so people find them stuck in those silos with very little recourse to do anything about it, either about the inflation component or about the just surveillance and control component and the ability to kind of just move their own portable capital to where they want it to be. But with this new technology, which again, it's been around for, Bitcoin's been around for 15 years and stable coins have been around for 10 years, but only in recent years has their liquidity gotten sufficient that this is actually becoming a very powerful tool for people around the world. And so now, when you go through a port of entry, there's technically infinite value density available, and that is something that is frightening for some policymakers and frightening for some people, but it's also something that when you think about how important that can be in the right context, that can be life-saving. So, for example, as Americans, some of us might not think, why is that a valuable feature? But anyone who's fled Venezuela or wanted to move from Lebanon or move from any kind of country that otherwise has money systems having an issue or authoritarianism, whatever the reason might be, there's actually ways to convert their value and bring them with them rather than kind of leaving most of their value at home. And then, of course, at the top there, these can all go around centralized bank wires. So instead of kind of going through their banking system, this can now go to people peer-to-peer, to at least anyone who has some semblance of an internet connection or can access this in some way. And so, for example, if I wanted to pay a Nigerian graphic designer, instead of going through her local currency and local banks and fake exchange rates, she can ask for whatever type of money she wants. She can ask for Bitcoin, she can ask for dollar stable coins, and as long as, for example, she can show me a QR code on a video call or send me some sort of payment string through the DM or an email or basically any way of communicating, then I'm able to send her the value that she wants and that she has control over and can bring it with her if she leaves, or she can use it there. And basically, there's more power between individuals and between peers. And I think that basically, especially in macroeconomic circles, which is where I focus a lot of my kind of broader investing work on, this still remains fairly, a lot of them view it as trivial. They still kind of, I think, are stuck in a mindset from 5 or 10 years ago where this is still fairly small, and I don't really think of it as actually having a large impact for non-techies or non-niche people. But the size that this kind of ability is getting now, the liquidity and the security of systems like Bitcoin, is actually pretty life-changing. And so I'm really glad to see that HRF has been at the forefront of kind of bringing this to a broader audience, a human rights audience, sometimes a non-technical audience, and basically saying that there are tools now that were not available for decades that are now becoming available for people all around the world to kind of have more empowerment in whatever jurisdiction they happen to be in.